They say the loudest cry for help is often made in total silence. Catherine Collins was a CEO who ruled a tech empire, yet she went home to a hollow penthouse every night. Jack Miller was the man who cleaned her floors, a shadow in a blue uniform who vanished when the sun came up. She thought he was a thief stealing her company's secrets. She never imagined that behind his tired eyes was a heartbreak so deep it would shatter her world and force her to face the one thing she feared most, her own loneliness. The glass walls of Nexus Technologies didn't just display the city skyline, they acted as a barrier between Catherine Collins and a world she no longer trusted. At 35, Catherine was the youngest CEO in the company's history, a woman whose Harvard MBA and sharp suits were armor against a past defined by a bitter, deceptive divorce. She ruled with an intimidating competence, trusting spreadsheets over human emotions because numbers, unlike people, never lied to her. But despite the power, her life was a curated desert, a cycle of high-stakes meetings and silent dinners with her 10-year-old son, Nathan. Every night, as Catherine exited her office, she passed Jack Miller. To the executive team, Jack was invisible, just a 42-year-old single father in a worn blue uniform who moved with practiced efficiency through the gleaming hallways. Jack carried the quiet, heavy dignity of a man who had seen his dreams turn to ash. He was lean from years of stretching every dollar to provide for his 8-year-old daughter, Emma, and his weathered hands spoke of a life spent in the trenches of survival. The collision began when security footage flagged Jack accessing restricted areas after his shift. Catherine watched the grainy tapes with growing suspicion, Jack lingering at executive computers and entering the server rooms at nearly midnight. With a massive product launch approaching, Catherine's walls went up. She saw a potential data breach. She saw another person waiting to betray her. She didn't see the silent struggle of a man who was using the only tools he had left to fight for a community that the world had forgotten. Determined to catch the traitor herself, Catherine traded her blazer for casual clothes and followed Jack's battered car into the decaying heart of the city. She expected to find him meeting with a competitor. Instead, she found him in a rundown classroom, standing before a whiteboard, teaching children how to build a future they weren't supposed to have. Catherine watched through a cracked window as the janitor she suspected of espionage transformed into a master architect. Jack's voice, usually a muted good evening at the office, was now warm and authoritative. He wasn't stealing data, he was teaching advanced systems architecture to teenagers who wore second-hand clothes and lived in the cycles of poverty. He was distributing refurbished laptops, equipment Catherine realized he had salvaged and fixed with his own hands. When Catherine was finally caught in her surveillance, the tension was thick with unspoken pain. "Miss Collins, is everything all right?" Jack asked, his tired face reflecting a mixture of confusion and a quiet, defensive pride. Catherine stammered an excuse, but Jack's sharp eyes saw through the lie. The next day, the investigation she ordered revealed a devastating truth. Jack Miller had once been Jonathan Miller, a brilliant systems architect who had been the primary developer of the very technology Nexus was built upon. 5 years ago, Jack had been a rising star until he blew the whistle on a corrupt CEO who was cutting safety corners in medical software. For his honesty, he was blacklisted, sued, and stripped of his career. Shortly after, his wife died of cancer, leaving him to raise Emma alone in the wreckage of his life. He hadn't just lost a job, he had lost his identity. He took the janitor job at Nexus because it was the only way to be near the technology he loved while staying invisible enough to avoid the people who had destroyed him. Catherine realized that the man she almost fired was actually the soul of her company. But before she could apologize, a catastrophic system failure hit Nexus 3 days before launch, threatening to wipe out millions. In a room full of panicked executives, Catherine did the unthinkable. She turned to the man with the cleaning cart and asked for his help. The boardroom fell into a shocked silence as Jack, still in his janitor's uniform, studied the error logs on Catherine's screen. Within 20 minutes, the janitor identified a memory allocation flaw in the core framework, a ghost in the code from the original development team that no one else could see. As his fingers flew across the keyboard with a precision that outclassed the company's best engineers, Catherine saw the man he used to be. For 48 hours, Jack worked side by side with the technical team, not as a cleaner, but as their leader. The launch was a triumph, and the stock price soared. But the real shift happened inside Catherine. At an all-hands meeting, she stood before her employees and offered Jack a seat at the technical leadership table. To her shock, Jack declined. "I made a choice 5 years ago between advancement and ethics," he said, his voice steady. "In losing that world, I found one where I am actually needed." He preferred the community center to the boardroom because the children there saw him as a hero, not just a service worker. Catherine, refusing to lose his influence, proposed a new path. Nexus would fund a massive technology outreach program, with Jack as the director. As they worked to build the initiative, the professional walls between them began to dissolve. They were two single parents who had both been wounded by life, Catherine by betrayal and Jack by a corrupt industry. In their shared isolation, they found a reflection of their own silent struggles. Catherine began visiting the center, not to monitor her investment, but to feel the warmth that her own success had lacked. Their partnership became the talk of the industry, but as Catherine grew closer to Jack and Emma, she realized that some architectures are more fragile than software. A board member's attempt to cut the charity funding forced Catherine to choose: would she retreat back into her spreadsheets, or would she risk everything for the man who had finally taught her how to feel? Catherine didn't just defend the funding, she challenged the board's institutional blindness. "We relegated the man who built our core architecture to cleaning floors because he had a conscience," she snapped. "How many other brilliant minds are we missing because they lack opportunity, not ability?" She won the battle, but she realized the victory wasn't about a budget, it was about her own redemption. She was no longer the ice queen, she was a woman who finally understood that true value couldn't be quantified in a quarterly report. 6 months later, the Westside Technology Center opened its new wing, the Jack Miller Technology Lab. The room was filled with neighborhood parents, software engineers, and children who were building websites instead of wandering the streets. Catherine watched Jack kneeling beside a young boy, showing the same patient focus he once used to solve million-dollar technical crises. He was no longer a ghost in the hallways, he was a mentor, an advocate, and a man who had his dignity restored. As the evening wound down, Catherine and Jack stood outside the center, watching their children, Nathan and Emma, play together. The silence between them was no longer awkward, it was comfortable, filled with the shared understanding of two people who had survived a storm and found each other in the aftermath. "I'm still learning to value what can't be measured," Catherine admitted, reaching for Jack's hand. Jack smiled, his eyes finally reflecting the light of a man who was no longer in hiding. "We all carry a silent struggle. For some, it is the pain of being unseen, for others, it is the loneliness of being at the top with no one to trust." Catherine and Jack's story is a reminder that some of the most important things we build aren't made of steel or code, they are built from the courage to look past a uniform and see a human being. Sometimes, you have to follow someone into the shadows to finally see the light.
Can't leave you behind. The moonlight flickers through the broken glass. Each shard reflects the moments from our past. A melody we built, now torn apart. I hum it slowly, straight from my heart. Echoes in the dark, your voice still hums, a tune that